Welcome back to another episode of the Discord Discussions. Today, we're going to be looking at the contrast between conservative men and progressive men. I use the term progressive versus liberal or Democrat, and I use conservative versus Republican or independent because that is a better, in my estimation, um, classification of people and the way they think. Are you for progress, right? Like, so my wife is very progressive, but she's super conservative in certain regards. She wants to see progress, but it has, as she said to me this morning, but it has to make sense. It can't be stupid progress. It has to actually be progress towards a good, not a negative, right? So, me and ML were talking about last night, and I just had made kind of a blanket statement, and it was kind of pointed out to me that what I said was a conservative or a red pill male idea. Because I said, we were talking about men and women, right? And I had said that women over time, because I was like, young men don't realize their currency, right? Or their value. And their value over time increases. So when you're 30, you're more competent. When you're 40, you're even more competent. And as a male, your competency is akin to your value. And I was pointed out to me that, oh, yeah, well, that's a right wing or that's a red pill idea or that's a conservative thought process, which got me to the idea of, okay, what does a progressive ideal male look like? So I don't know that answer because I'm obviously not one. So I can't begin to have a opinion on it. So I wanted to put it out to have each person in the group determine where they feel they align, not where they think other people view them, not where society, where you and how you view your own masculinity. So I'll start simply because I'm the head of the group. I would view myself as very much a conservative. There are things I'm liberal about, but the majority of my views are probably conservative. I view masculinity as competency, and I view it as a strength. I view it as, for myself, doing the right thing because it's the right thing and for no other reason. Um, when I was a young man, my dad asked me to define what a man was, right, or what an adult was, and my answer to that was an individual that does what's correct when the authority figure isn't present, which to me I think is a real interesting perception, right? But it also goes to that I follow the rules as much as I choose to. I mean, there are things, of course, everyone breaks the rules, and we don't drive
We
the
don't
speed
drive
limit.
the speed.
We don't do always the right thing when we're supposed to. Stallings, I'm having myself loop through your audio, brother. Your mic is picking up everything. So, um, my my basic premise of what a conservative male looks like is that of a competent provider that takes care of their their family, their coworkers, the people around them. They're a positive influence in the community. Now, I'm going to give a bit of a prediction before everybody speaks because I was thinking about this last night. What I think is going to happen at the end of this conversation, and I'm sure it'll go a lot of different places, we're going to probably uncover that if you were to take the two spheres that are conservation and progression, I will bet that they overlap on 75% of their core beliefs and values. Because otherwise, we'd be at war with each other. Because men are not much for tolerance with things that we disagree with. We're a volatile people. Violence is always an option amongst men. So I'm going to grab Phil next, then Fly, Seth, then ML. So, Phil, you have the floor, my friend.
To kind of sum it up very quickly, quite, um, I guess ancient would be the word of the kids. Would call my perspective ancient, which is it's just old school. Um, and I think everybody has their own perspective on this, and so I'm curious to see where the conversation goes.
You,
Um,
you can't get away with that lame of an answer.
okay, well, it's not really lame. Like if you were to go back as far as you can, I identify and agree with more um 16th century methodologies than I do current methodologies.
In regards to what?
Um, in regards to manliness, like if
Well, define that for me.
are you a provider? Do you have skill? Do you go out and you do what you're supposed to do? You do the hard things because you have to. You're the last line of defense. And if you go even further back than that, they were the, I guess, hunter gatherers, quote unquote. I know there's a lot of counter argument there, but that's like, I guess, regionally specific. Um, I think it's a very broad topic, and so to kind of nail it down would be kind of difficult.
Fair enough. Fly, you're muted, so you have to unmute, brother.
What is it to be a man?
What is it? Okay, so what
Yeah, yeah.
how do you define? So first of all, categorize yourself conservative or progressive or in between. Second, where do you think an ideal male in that sphere? What should their character traits be?
I think I'm, damn man, I'm middle.
Huh?
I think I believe in what truth is to me, brother. Uh, after I look at what's said or what's going on, I try to dive into. I try to understand instead of understanding things. Try to go inside of it. Try to go into it. And I think, man, to me, is being human, man. Taking accountability. Know that you have flaws. You're not perfect. Hell, if you stand on something, fucking stand on it. 10 toes deep. So, in a nutshell, that's, and also what the brother said before me, being a father, you know, you have to lead by example. And sometimes leading by example can work both ways. If you're a bad example, you can teach a person also what not to do.
You're not wrong.
So, in a nutshell, just taking accountability, standing in your truth. Like I said again, I reiterate, 10 toes deep and cement into your truth.
Fair enough. Stallings. You got to unmute first.
So I hate identification politics. I just do.
It's not politics. It's your opinion.
This leading to it.
Okay.
My opinion is, I have, whatever my internal reflection of what masculinity is or what society thinks.
Your
I've
internal.
never cared. So I've always cared what I felt and what those around me felt and who I was responsible for. So I tried to, a little bit look into the argument is progressive masculinity. That term, I mean, if it's an identity, I don't know what that is. That's a hard thing to define. But I would say that I'm more traditional, homogenous, masculine, based on what society would say that the things that I support and value.
Like 1950s John Wayne kind of guy.
Well, the whole John Wayne, I was gonna go somewhere with that. Not to pull in religion too early, but I think there is. Let me pull back my opinion. What I think it is. I agree with that. What everyone said. I think that's whatever makes you personally feel responsible as a man to and who you're accountable for. I would say that's a masculine quality. I don't think that's necessarily for a man. But what I'm more interested is, what's what's the future for masculinity? Not just in the past. I get it. We all get it. What it is today is a little bit confusing, but what is the future of masculinity, I guess, and conceptualized for young men and boys. And I have my worries about it too, but I'm more concerned about what it's going to be in the future, what men need now to help develop the traditional values that y'all discussed. I think it's important, but also what does the world and the community need from us in terms of how we're demonstrating what's masculine, I guess is my better way to put it. So I define myself as a traditional homogenous masculinity. I kind of agree with most of those defining things of what's masculine. But what I fight is the idea of that there's no room or future for it to change. And I have pushback from there. That's not a political stance. And I think masculinity is just it's a re-emerging as too much of a crucial part of political identity. That's the part I'm not comfortable with. I'm not comfortable with I'm a liberal, therefore X masculine, or I'm conservative X. I don't understand the purpose of that. To me, it's just a way to performative. I think there are a lot of masculinity is performative that we see, and you can do that, I guess, but that's not my thing. Never has been. I've had long hair for a long time in my life in Texas, and I've always said my opinion. So I have heard it my whole life about what I am missing the steps on being masculine, and I've never had a problem with it or cared. So does society suffer? Whatever. Do I suffer? Who cares? And I'm not a victim in it, and I don't care about it. But I would say what's more masculine to me is someone standing up for themselves as a man versus what society thinks a man should set up. I'm not saying it doesn't have value. I'm not saying traditional roles don't have their place. But in my view, I really could give a shit about what anyone's term for what's masculine or not, because I think it's important, but it's not a identity. I don't know that. And I've talked, so that's my
All right.
summary.
ML.
Yeah, I'm classical, liberal, free thinker. That's about as much as I ever identify myself. So I'm just kind of looking at it as like it's pretty 10,000-foot view, low resolution. So we're kind of talking about stereotypes. So kind of like the stereotypical, or you could say just the ubiquitously expressed positive values from each side. And I just made a list based on what I've seen, college campuses, workplaces, stuff like that. So as far as I can tell, the progressive, these are the traits in men that progressives, and again, this is very low resolution. This is not everyone. These very generalizing, but the traits that I've noticed that are praised in men on the left, the progressives, are tolerance. We'll get into the hypocrisy of that later. Gentleness, big time. In touch with his own emotions and able to express them. There's a big primacy on that. Stands up for the rights of the less fortunate. That's a big one. Don't punch up, or sorry, don't punch down, punch up, that sort of thing. Non-violent. Yeah, I mean, violence and aggression, as per that APA article I just posted, the very notion of violence and aggression itself is demonized on the left in men. In pretty much all its forms, they're incredibly unsophisticated about how they view and frame male aggression, in my opinion. Not sexually possessive. So this is not all progressive people, but the breakup of the nuclear family is an idea that is completely on the left. The idea of sexual possessiveness itself, like that phrase, you'll only ever hear that uttered by people who are leftists. And open relationships are almost exclusively an idea and behavior pattern of the progressives. I'm not aware of that at all being tolerated or practiced in conservative circles. And again, I'm not judging, I'm just describing. So leftist men are generally aware of their own privilege within society and sophisticated. What I mean by that is that they've thought about, like, they've read Schrodinger's Rapist, and they've actually, taken from that the positive, good things that are there to be taken and not the bad things. I'll go into more about what sophisticated means later. What I also mean by that, I should say, is that leftist men in general do not have an aversion to expertise or experts or elite schools of knowledge. Anti-elitism and anti-intellectualism has long been on the side of the right. and I'll talk more about that in a second. Um, leftist men are praised for their passiveness. So leftist men are always encouraged to step out of the way for and give their privileged space to less fortunate minorities, for example, or women. Leftist men are always being told to step aside and make room for others and to not speak and to let others with less privileged positions speak. So therefore, passivity is very much encouraged in leftist men. Leftist men are expected to be very conformist and praised when they are conformist. The idea, leftist men are only ever praised for being anti-conformist if they're rebelling against a conservative system. If they're rebelling against a leftist system, they are not praised for that. So the mere act of being a free thinker or being rebellious is, as far as I can tell, is not praised on the left consistently. It's only praised when it's against conservative values. They are physically weak and contemptuous of male strength as a general rule. This is this is so hilariously obvious every time we see Antifa go up against the Proud Boys, and the Antifas are like twigs, and the Proud Boys all look like roided out goons. You know, I don't need to talk more about that. They generally have contempt for traditional gender roles. They generally have contempt for tradition as a whole. They're usually secular, and they're open to change and progress. So that this is all going to sound like a mixed bag intentionally. So here comes the right, because I'm trying to be fair-minded about it. So on the right, the values that are praised in men: aggression. This is a bit unsophisticated, and this is why toxic masculinity, which is a real thing, hardcore bullying culture, hardcore hazing culture, all that sort of stuff tends to exist on the right. That tends to be, in my opinion, because the right-wing view, the conservative view of masculinity, is unsophisticated in its view of aggression, and it simply treats all male aggression as good. The sexually possessive and dominant, absolutely, that is a conservative maxim. Conservatives have nothing, I've seen nothing but contempt for open relationships. Even when those open relationships have been shown to work, I've not seen conservatives show any kind of interest in engaging it logically. Dominance, yeah, it's something that conservatives don't talk a lot about, but every time I've brought it up, the reaction has been one of disgust. If you bring up with conservative men the idea of a woman leading in the bedroom in any sense, they start to look at you like you're a little bit, yeah, so that's another thing. Conservative men tend to have a detached relationship with their own feelings and emotions, and that is praised on the right. The right has an unsophisticated engagement with male sensitivity and emotion. This is one of the strongest points that the left has about this, and which I feel very passionately about. The right's macho culture is good in a lot of senses, but it needs refinement, because a lot of the macho stuff is actually toxic and really brutal and not good for anyone. The idea of the masculine on the conservative side, they stand up for their own principles and beliefs. They do not stand up for the principles and beliefs of others. They do not stand up for the less fortunate, unless doing so is in accordance with their own principles and beliefs. So conservative men tend to be the final judge of things. They are nonconformist. They are capable of profound violence and tend to practice it. They are unaware of their own privilege in society or simply deny it, and that's kind of unsophisticated. The anti-intellectualism it's now, I would say, on the left as well in their denial of biological science, but it is traditionally and for the longest time been on the right. And that, yeah, the idea that intellectuals and elites are kind of like icky and dubious, that's all on the right. That's all conservative. They're rebellious and difficult to control, which is why it's good to have a solid population of conservative men in your country to make sure that a tyrant doesn't take over, because if a tyrant does take over, you're going to need your right-wing conservative men to overthrow him. They are generally intolerant, although this is, again, that needs to be unpacked, because I don't mean, like, conservatives are not generally intolerant. Like, in the West, I don't find conservatives to be intolerant of homosexual people, as an example. All the conservatives I know have, like, gay friends, and because there's tons of gay conservatives now too. So it's not an intolerance to that. It's more, I would say, maybe less open to change and progress would be the kind of intolerance I mean. Confidence and leadership, big time on the right. men are expected to be leaders and providers. The idea of having a woman leading a man, I think, is inherently a little bit icky to people on the right. Decisive individualists, that comes with, being difficult to control and being very self-centered, and having your own, core set of values. Physically strong, proud of male strength. I think this is one of the great things about the conservative right, and how they view masculinity. I think the way the left has basically demonized male strength, demonized it or denied it, like through this whole denial of biology and saying that men are inherently no better at sports than women, like all that stuff. So the left is really confused when it comes to male strength, and they're not proud of it, which I think is insane, because I think you should be proud of it. Of course, the right conforms to traditional gender roles, even when not conforming to them would be better for both of the people involved. They tend to insist that you conform to them anyways, so a little unsophisticated there. Values tradition as a whole. Yeah, so as a whole, tradition is a good thing, and sometimes they value it too much because they're not willing to overturn it when rationality dictates. And they're generally suspicious of change and progress, which sounds like a bad thing, but I think it's just like kind of a natural counterbalance to the eagerness of the left to change. You need a bit of a counterbalance to that. You need some people going, well, as Bean said about his wife, it's like, well, change is good. Like, no conservative is against change just for the sake of being against change, but they have to be convinced that this change aligns with their own, ideals and principles, etc. There, I've said enough. That's my description, my perception and description in the most general terms of how I see masculine values treated on the left and the right, in contrast. And the next time I get to speak, I'll talk about overlap.
So, I'm going to throw Phil under the bus for a minute.
And all my opinion, argue away with all that. None of what I just said. That sounded like a list of facts. It was not. It was a list of assertions based on my opinion. None of that. I just always state my position strongly, but please don't take any of that to be me representing facts. That is my opinion. Thank you.
Fair enough. So, I've been a professional salesman all my life, and I read body language really well. And God, I love you, Seth. You are the worst poker player in the history of the world. We definitely need to gamble together. Like,
well, why would he be trying to hide his feelings? It's supposed to be an open conversation.
I know.
Like,
it's just...
I like that he's expressive. Why would you be trying? Like, who's
You're
he
muted,
trying
buddy.
to bluff here? You're
muted, Seth.
I would love to play cards. I'm terrible at it. So yeah.
So I was listening to that list, and my initial thought was
I tried to make it like have things that both sides, that like Seth and me would kind of have problems with on the left, and y'all as conservatives would have some problems on the right. I tried to make it a bit like I wasn't BSing, but I was trying to make it a bit, I don't know, stir something up, because I see problems with both sides' conceptions of masculinity. So,
and I agree. I don't think either side has a stranglehold on what masculinity is, right? So, and I'm gonna pick off on Seth on religion for a minute, and I'm going to say Jesus was pretty much the ideal male. Like, he was compassionate, strong, decisive, like, he was God incarnate according to Western belief.
He had a lot of both. Like,
that's what I'm saying. Like,
on my list,
if
tolerance,
you take that list, he fits all of them,
like,
right?
Non-violent, yeah, Jesus.
All the good things on each side, Jesus accurately represented in the...
He wasn't passive, although in many ways he was, because he turned the other cheek. I mean, Jesus enables a lot of both sides there.
Yeah, so that's where I was going to say, okay, how did we, I'm going to ask Seth and Phil, because Phil knows the Torah, right? It's the Torah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so how does the Torah present masculinity? Because I don't know anything about the Torah. Because I know they view Jesus as a prophet, right? So, what is the Torah's, or what would you say would be the Torah's presentation on what masculinity looks like? Or is there a caricature or a representation other than Jesus in the Torah?
A very deep question, and I think from any stance of the word, you're getting close when it comes to representing. You call him by a lot of names, but I'll just use the I guess common term, which is Jesus.
Yahweh, pick one.
Yeah. The idea isn't that he was the things that we're all supposed to, or he was the ideal image we're supposed to follow after. Everybody, doesn't matter who you are. And so to say that he's masculine or feminine is kind of goofy, because you're starting to blend religious interactions and masculine traits, right? You're starting to blend them, because when you start talking about love, right, turn the other cheek, that is not in conversation of should you be a conformist or should you be passive. That's not that type of question. That's a question of, if someone offends you, you should let it slide, forgive them, move on, right? Whereas the masculine side is that you're talking about a trait that is specific, like gender specific, where you're saying, are you for the majority of time a confrontational human being? I'm not confrontational, but I'm very direct in my motive. And so I don't conform very easily to new, like if someone throws me a new idea, I'm willing to search it out, but I'm not going to immediately conform to it just because it sounds good, right? Does that categorize me as conservative? I don't know. I wouldn't think so. Does that categorize me as something else? I don't know. I don't really try and throw myself into a category. I let other people do that for me. But to say that Jesus was a good role model is a good stepping stone to say, yeah, probably. You know, I think there's a good balance, like we were talking about. There's a good balance between being dangerous, right, as a male, and being withheld, or being able to control that dangerous side, right? Reserved, yes. And so you have these two sides of a conversation, and being able to distinguish the two is going to be kind of difficult.
Fly?
You want to know, Jesus is the
Would you? I'm asking your opinion on. So my statement was: does Jesus really represent the ideal form of masculinity?
that's yeah, I had to think on that.
Okay.
I mean,
Take a minute. Oh, I'll move
yeah, I
over
had
to
to
Seth.
think.
What do you think, Seth? Got to unmute, brother.
Yes.
He's like, yep.
Yeah. So I liked how it was said about you know, Jesus was for everyone. So let's answer the masculine question by answering the feminine question. Is Jesus the ideal candidate for feminism? Feminism. Hello. You know, so that doesn't make sense, because you're like, well, you know, but I like the idea that it's for everybody in both.
He's a god in a dude's body.
Like, but you know, what are the traits of, you know, the positive aspects of being a female? So
hold on, Seth. That's next week. That's going to be next week, because we've got way too much to unpack in that. Okay, let's start it. Okay.
We're talking about the masculine. You can talk about the feminine.
Fair enough. Go ahead.
Two sides of the same coin.
Go for it.
Which is why I was bringing that up when it was said that, you know, if the question is Jesus the ideal candidate? I would say yes for both. The traits that we're talking about, I mean, the overlap that y'all mentioned before, I don't see a lot of overlap in traditional masculine roles overlapping with Jesus Christ. I mean, personally, I don't see that, but I also what I did start out by saying was that I word progressive masculinity, or the aspiration or a work in progress of masculinity, if that's, we can encapsulate what that word might mean, progressive. If you're talking about liberal masculinity, I feel like that's where we went a little bit, but that term doesn't make any sense to me. I like the idea of Jesus as the ideal candidate because it breaks down, and it can't overlap, because No, yeah, if it's God in a dude's body, or if it's the ideal characteristics of all humans, let's have a foundation that maybe that's what it is. So, are there roles that we can do? Of course there are. Of course, I think all of us are
Yeah, you're
semi-aware.
better at cutting down a tree than my wife is.
I'm sorry.
You're better at cutting down a tree than my wife is. And I'm pretty sure my
Sure.
wife is a better
Well,
scientist than you are
well,
a
my wife
scientist. You
is
know what I
better.
mean?
Well, my wife is better at field dressing a deer and hunting. So, my wife was raised a hunter and kills animals and took their hides, and that's her. So, what is that? That doesn't mean anything. Like, so am I bigger than her? Sure. Do I have 100 pounds of weight? Sure. And I got to fight a grizzly bear? Okay. But okay, I'm going off topic. So, sticking with the religious side, I
Sure.
think that I like this idea of Jesus being ideal characteristic wise, and what are the characteristic traits that Jesus had that we can apply to current masculinity. And to me, that's a good thing. I mean, I don't. What are the negative aspects of masculinity Jesus Christ had? I can't think of any. So, but then we can apply that same thing to current, like, oh, liberal men, left men don't this, or non-aggressive, or that type stuff is a bad thing, but it's great when it's Jesus Christ in comparison. Again, I just would like to open it back up to when it comes to the religious dialogue of an ideal, because then we can actually have some um, better conversation than John Wayne being the ideal, male characteristic, traditional,
Well,
role that.
let's talk about let's unpack John Wayne for a second because I actually think John Wayne's a good place to show like how we have to be progressive in some sense with our masculine values because we can't like okay, so here's a question for the conservative guys here. Um, what point out one problem, something problematic. I know we all love that word. Point out something problematic in in John Wayne specifically, his presentation of masculinity through his movies. What is something about that we can look on now, and even as conservatives say, okay, we can improve on that. That's a bit better. Tell me something about John Wayne that doesn't work. As an exercise, consider it an exercise in good faith, because otherwise you're saying he's perfect, and that's crazy.
Yeah, no,
mean,
no. So you could take a number of them. One of them being just legit whoredom, but that's beside the point. That's very apparent. There are a lot of masculine traits that he had that were good, but there are also a lot of traits that were.
Yeah, so I'm asking for an
So,
example of one
okay,
of the ones that was
here's
not.
easy. Okay, he was a drunkard in 3/4 of the movies he was in. He always
Okay,
had
so just
alcohol.
he was a
He was
drunk.
he was
He was
yeah
a
right.
drunk.
All of his
Okay,
masculine
yeah.
characters had a massive flaw in their character.
Okay, but let's talk about that. So, but like being a heavy drinker is, I mean, traditionally that's actually been considered pretty darn masculine. Would you not agree?
But it's not good.
Well, yeah. So that's what I'm
Yeah.
saying is that now, like, we realize that alcoholism is this debilitating, lethal illness and not something that we should be celebrating
Yeah.
as a guy being macho, right? Like, there's the problem that I've always had with the conservative ideal. Well, not ideal, but a lot of the conservative presentations of masculinity, particularly with that macho thing, is that it's just it's way too unsophisticated. It's just like it's too extreme, and it goes so far as to like, yeah, he's a hardcore man. That's why he drinks and smokes because he doesn't give a fuck. And then it's like, okay, like that might cut to Yul Brynner doing those painful to watch commercials when he was dying of lung cancer. Talking about how he regretted smoking, and I mean, Yul Brynner was one of the most masculine by any like
King and
like
I.
he's the king and I, right? Like he would meet all of those ones I just put on the right for the masculine virtues of the right. But at the end of his life, he was frail, he was quiet, he was gentle, and he was remorseful. of having lived that hard-fought life. And that's and that's actually something that you were talking about earlier at the very start as well, is how young men have a really difficult, I would say young people, it's not a gendered thing. I think young women face the same issue. Young people have a hard time, I don't even think it's a young person thing. People in general have a hard time making decisions with respect
Yeah,
to
but
their future selves. It's just it's really difficult when you're young and you think you're invincible and you're full of hormones and blah 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 and aggression and everything else. And I'd like as an example of John Wayne.
Hold on.
John Wayne's just a perfect example to me, because it's like,
yeah,
I think a lot of people on the right still really hold him up as being this perfect representation of these virtues. And it's like, no, he's a wonderful representation of a bunch of good virtues. I like John Wayne. I'm not shitting on him. But he's also a representation of some really bad things that we should probably, chronic alcoholism. That's not actually like I know some of the most masculine men in history have also been alcoholics, but that's not like part of. I think it's so to me it's
positive.
like divorcing the alcoholism from the masculinity is necessary.
Go ahead, Flash.
masculinity can mean different can mean something different to many people. And when you go back on the Jesus / John Wayne, Jesus showed us, yes, because he stood in his truth. That's why I was stuck in thought, like, wow, he stood by his truth all the way to death. But on the flip side of that, for me, Jesus taught humankind how to have a in human form. That's what I get out of Jesus. But I didn't know. I mean,
repeat what you said, Fly. It broke up.
Yeah, you cut out there.
I said Jesus taught humankind how to have a relationship with God in human form. Okay? How to have a human personal relationship with the Creator. Jesus did not teach me, I'm talking for me, how to act and relate with a woman in a marriage or a relationship. Jesus was never married. Now, John Wayne didn't teach me anything. Because when I found out myself found out a lot of personal things about him. So everything I watched in the movie was a damn lie to me.
Oh yeah, he was a racist.
So
I have just a little. Oh
yeah,
he was
a racist.
But
so I have nothing. My
homophobe too. Didn't like gays.
So I didn't want to go into John. When ML had asked the traits of John Wayne, he was implicit in saying the film, not the man, because the man outside the film we could rip apart super easy.
Well, even in the films, this guy slapped women, shot Indians just for being Indians. Like he was representing a mode of masculinity. To be fair to him, he was representing a mode of masculinity that was 100 years in the past, back when he was making the movies. So I mean, he was representing how men were in the West, like the Wild West in the 1850s,
when we were settling our country.
Yeah, exactly. Where it's like you didn't have the luxury of sensitivity because you could die the next second. I mean, there's no question. But like, so that's I think that masculinity, like the conceptions of masculinity need to be constantly updated, because the last thing we want to do is have a conception of masculinity that's not congruent with our current environment. The last thing we want to be doing is, because that's basically the same thing as acting out our biological impulses and then just saying, oh well, it's my biology. And it's like, well, no, we're not animal. Like we're divisible from animals because we can overcome our biological impulses. But
then when I found out in the cowboy movies, Western movies, they always made the Native Americans, like the bad guy, the demon.
Always.
They was always, all they was doing just defending the land that they were on. They were being invaded. So yeah, that part.
Well, and they never, there was never. That's why it was funny. I like making lists in my head, and I was trying to think of, because like for movies, the decade of 2010 to 2020, I'm like, this has got to be the worst decade for movies ever. But then I started thinking, okay, well, no, let me test that, and I suddenly realized, 1950 to 1960. That was such a terrible. There's like Bridge on the River Kwai and I can't even remember. There's like one other movie worth watching. It's like that. It was such an awful decade, and it really was because you watch movies from that decade, even the sci-fi movies, and it's all just the most ham-fisted, old-fashioned, unsophisticated versions of conservative masculinity that you can get, and it's just, yeah, it's exhausting sometimes to watch because it's like, yeah, there's lots of good things to see, but then there's also lots of cringe where you're just or like James Bond in the early '60s slapping what's her toot on the ass and saying "rung along, sweetheart," man talk. Where you're just like, oh man, that was unironic. That was like. That was, and guys are looking at Sean Connery now and like, that was a real man, blah blah blah. And sure, he was in a sense, but I'm like, okay, but let's not cargo cult it. Let's not bring some stuff in that we don't want to bring in when let's not just accept him in totality here, right? Like, it's just, we can look back and we can laugh at the unsophistication of our antecedents in the same way that our descendants are going to look at us and laugh at our unsophistication. That's called progress. That's an indication that progress is happening.
Especially James Bond. I mean, he gave me the idea that if he walk into a room, he can make it fuck my woman. The hell.
Well, the confidence. Yeah. So let's talk about the good part of James Bond, right? The confidence to just walk into a room and not subordinate yourself to anyone else in that room automatically. That's just not in you. You walk into a room and you automatically consider yourself an equal with everyone else, regardless of what the room is. That kind of confidence, most of the time, you don't want to have that kind of confidence walking in to, say, some medical symposium and you know nothing about medicine. You obviously want to, what needs to be right for the moment. Just as a general thing, having that kind of confidence is better in a man than not having that kind of confidence. And yeah, I mean, but male confidence is not like, so if we're going to do the comparative again, there's no, the right has no problem, conservative conceptions of masculinity have no problem with male confidence, no problem at all. They totally celebrate it. I do not see the same celebration of male confidence on the left. And that's one of the areas on the left where I'd like to see.
I'm going to let you talk. I want to see what I know.
Yeah, go ahead.
Stalin's.
So just on ML's point, I saw quickly from Pew. I know you can say whatever statistics.
No, I value Pew.
But said the question was how men view themselves, not boys, grown men, how men view themselves. And they said 31% of those in this poll say that they felt very masculine. Another 54% said somewhat masculine. So I'm throwing out that number. You have 15% say that they're not masculine at all or don't feel the need to be. Predominantly, most men still say, or majority would say, I feel masculine. I have a lot of masculine traits. But what we're seeing, in my opinion, is this backlash. Like half the country doesn't think they're real men and men aren't men. And what's going to happen to our country? This fear mongering of like the loss of strength, the loss of confidence, the loss of that figurehead that could be a rock in a storm. And that's why we look at people like John Wayne is the tough guy in the crowd. But in reality, most of these assholes still think they're masculine, still think they're men, still think, they're aggressive, they're dominant, they want to succeed, they view themselves how other men view themselves or view them. And I want to say with ML, I agree. I love how you said that it is a constant updating of what we think masculinity should be. And I completely agree. That's the aspiration of what it's a work in progress.
Well, Jordan Peterson says it
having a work in progress.
And Peterson says it like this: compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not who somebody else is today. The idea of men and people as a group should always be trying to improve on their own person over time.
Well, and I found that Pew poll you're talking about. I posted it there. It's very good. I like Pew a lot. They're good. Look at the disparity. 49% of black men consider themselves to be very masculine, compared to 28% of white men. So that is almost double. That asks the question just of itself. Why? I don't, and I would ask everyone because I don't know the answer. I'm going to keep reading the article, but that's a huge disparity.
Again,
A lot of us answer.
Agreed. It is at the bottom of that pew, and I started to look at that, but
It's not at the bottom, it's in the middle.
Small little subnote of breaking it down by race. I think it's harder with that. I mean, there might be a cultural thing there to discuss. I don't want to break masculinity based
Hang on.
on
Are you implying that those numbers are not meaningful or suggestive of an obvious question?
No, it is. Like it's worth talking about. Yeah, but again, like,
well, yeah, because it's
hey, the problem with this skewed. This wasn't an even numbered of race. It wasn't 30 white men, 30 black guys, 30 Hispanic guys. That's not how it was. So if you read rest of that statistic, it's you can take that, but if 86% of men think that they're masculine, so that's saying the 15% that don't, that's all white men. Based on 28% of white men don't.
That's not what this. No, that's not what the stats say at all.
The same article is saying that 15% of men don't think that they're masculine.
You just completely misrepresented your own stats, sir.
No.
Hold on. We're getting into semantics.
You said 86. No, this is easy to figure out because it's right in black and white in front of us. You said 86% consider themselves masculine. False. 54% describe themselves as somewhat masculine. You just lumped the somewhat masculine with the very masculine.
No, I did not, ML. 31% consider themselves extremely masculine. 54% consider themselves somewhat masculine. So that's 86% of men think that they have some or somewhat masculinity.
Okay, but that's not what you said. You said masculine. You added the caveat because I pointed it out. That caveat's everything.
I'm not, sir. That is why I'm saying 15% of men. Would you agree? 15% of men do not feel like they are or are not at all masculine.
I'm gonna break. Hold on. I'm gonna interrupt both of you.
I recorded the whole thing.
So excuse me, please.
All right.
Thank you.
Why are you interrupting?
Because
we're sorting it out. Why are you interrupting?
But you're not sorting it out because neither.
Yes, we are. We literally have the stats. We have the article.
I know.
We're reading through it. This is how people solve. Like, don't interrupt unless you're adding something.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Let me add to it on my point of view about
it's right in front of us, and he said he equivocated somewhat masculine with masculine. That's wrong. That's not appropriate. And it's right in the article that he provided. So now he has added the somewhat to the 86. Now we're fine. All he needed to do was add the somewhat to the 86 because the difference between somewhat masculine and masculine is so important that this
it is so important that when we rewind this and you listen to what I said, if you literally rewind this,
what you said. That's why I on it.
Specifically, you put the same article that I was bringing up, and I started this, and I listed all three. Did I not? I first brought this article up, and then you posted the article, and then you said based on race. I said, wait, and the whole group, 15%. That's my concern. Why do 15% of all men not feel a little bit or all the way masculine?
Let's talk about that because that is dramatic too.
That's the important part, not the somewhat to very much. Who cares if I'm somewhat?
I think why would people describe themselves as somewhat masculine? What does that even mean?
I don't know. I don't know what that means.
I want to add something to this because you guys, before that whole, and it is important. I won't discredit it, okay? And I don't want you to feel like I am. But before that whole exchange, the thought I was having was me and ML the other night, probably a week or so ago, we watched the fight between Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury. And Tyson got hit with a 3-piece that would put anyone to sleep. He sat there on his back, looking at the ref, just in his head counting, and then just got up and kept fighting. And Chris made a comment like these two guys would be like tribal leaders, right? Because of their physical prowess, their unrelenting ability for violence, their strength, power. My question would be, where does that guy fit in today's masculine frame?
In the boxing ring. Getting CTE and sacrificing his future.
Somewhat masculine in the boxing world.
Right, so I don't see any, like, I'll bet you if you polled all of the MMA and all of boxing, all of combat sports, exclusionary of women's sport, combat sports, there will be a 0.0% group that says they're not masculine. There won't be that 15%. So my question is, how come you can have a very large pool of men that are in competitive combat sports, and that's not a small group. That's
no, but it's
industry.
it's a selected group. The answer is there's a selection process that preferences large, aggressive males with like high testosterone, and I think those males are also the least likely to rate themselves as feeling unmasculine, would be my guess.
See what I mean? So my question is, I know that
Oh well, here and then a corollary to that,
interesting.
maybe, to your question, maybe the inverse of that. So if there's zero, if we assume, for sake of argument, that the vast majority of the males in like the UFC and the MMA are all very, like, we can assume they all consider them, they're all confident in their masculinity, and they're all strong, high testosterone, blah blah blah. Could we then assume or make some kind of an induction that the 15% that do not consider themselves, or that are not confident, do not consider themselves masculine, they're not confident in their masculinity, are they likely to be physically weak and low in testosterone?
I think you're having a conversation there of confidence too, because testosterone does play a part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's going to all be built in. Yeah. So would the 15% be? It just would be an interesting question if you were to grab that 15% and test their T levels.
Yeah, and then where they live.
I bet they have low testosterone.
Eat? What do they eat? Like, because I know
socioeconomic factors.
Like, there's a lot of things.
Are the 15% poor? Yeah, maybe they just. Yeah, I don't know.
So that's like, I think that 15% is an interesting question, truly, and I'm also of the belief that as you start to compartmentalize groups of men, right? Like when we started this conversation, which was, what is a conservative man versus a progressive man, right? So I saw an interesting little snippet, 30-second video on Twitter, where Dana White and Trump walked into UFC 270. I think it was last night. And, like, everybody in the room's like, woo, Trump. Yeah. The fighters got out to shake his hand. And it's like, okay, that's interesting. Because I would venture to say if the current administrative person walked into UFC 20 with, trying to get a comparative to Dana White, but Bill Maher. Yeah, Bill Maher and the current office walks into UFC 270. What would the crowd do, right? So that bodes an interesting question, which I was going to ask. How much do you think that 15% falls on the progressive side versus the conservative side? Because when we listed the initial group, dumb Republican redneck fighting is a very conservative thing, right? Physical prowess is a very conservative concept. Not that progressive people
I would guess the vast majority of the 15% are on the left. Yeah, I don't. I think that in general,
but do you think that's
you're
taught,
kind of dying.
Do you think that's a taught thing?
Yes. Yeah. It would have to be. I mean, it's like from this poll. This is a really interesting part. So views differ more widely among party lines with regards to whether it's a good thing that society values masculinity as a whole. So 78% of Republicans say it's a good thing that society values masculinity, compared with 49% for Democrats and Democrat leaning. So less than half, well, yeah, 49%, we'll just say half of Democrat leaning, we can just say left, progressive, feel, less than half of them feel that valuing masculinity at all by society is a good thing, according to this.
Go ahead.
That's a little troubling because it's like, well, if you're not valuing any part of masculinity, like that's so broad stroke. Like you're not none of it. Like maybe that's probably just that's probably the poll just being imprecise. I would guess, because that seems weird.
I would agree with that, ML. Like I would want to say that I think polls like this, especially, we know. I mean, if I had to ask anybody, that more than likely, its political identity would say that, people that thought masculinity was a bad thing, like this poll said, would be more left. That kind of makes sense. Problem, like this poll can't really do, is what type of masculinity? Traditional masculinity, what they're being told is,
yeah, all of it, like all masculinity.
Right. So I don't think they decided, like, do you think standing up for your family or being courageous or brave or bad things? No, they weren't asked that. They have been told, like, the term, just like liberal, like we first started, has turned into something different, and a lot of left-leaning people see the term masculinity to represent traditional things that have been, they felt, outside the norm or not a part of or powerless against. I can understand why they could have a reaction to a word, masculinity. So, and I'm glad this poll kind of helps guide a conversation. And the race thing, I don't even know how to break that apart. I do think it's interesting, but what I found more interesting was that so many men on the left, half of them, thought that it was a bad thing to have, like, masculinity was somehow a negative thing, versus the right saw masculinity as a positive thing. I do not think masculinity is a negative thing. I guess, the 51% of left leaning. It is concerning how that maybe just this poll, but even just the guys we are using media about masculinity is being politically motivated and pushed, and that's what they're responding to on polls like this. They're responding to, oh, the toxic masculinity. I hate that, but it's true. That's what they're attaching.
Oh, and they might be thinking when they take the poll, they like interpret the question politically. So they read the question and then they're like, yeah, what is my side gonna say? And I pick that thing. Yeah, totally. I mean, yeah, you can only do so much with polls. And so like the racial stuff. That's a question for another time, because I'm still looking at 49 compared to 28, and that's blowing my mind. I don't know how to process that. That is such a big disparity. But yeah, we'll leave that for another time, because I got no clue about that either.
Yeah.
You see that 1 in 5 women say it's very important for them to be seen as womanly or feminine. 32% say it's somewhat important. So you've got almost half of women saying it's not important for them to be seen as womanly or feminine. It's another shocking, like, whoa, okay.
Fly, you're the only black man here, so I'm not going to let anybody else talk about black people. That's just, my daughter is mixed, and I grew up in Baltimore, so I have a really good relationship.
The optics
with
are
the
never
black
good
community.
for white guys to talk about black people when there's black people in the room. I know.
No shit. So
no, I just had an explanation of why I think it's, it denoted that percentage.
Shoot.
A lot of black males grew up without having an example of what it's like to be a man. So we had to learn by error. Our moms, from right around first, second, third grade, started treating us like little men.
Like
protect. Yeah, like little men. We had to protect the house. We had to be, slash protector, slash protect mama, protect the siblings, beat them in.
A bit early.
So yeah, we had to grow up fast.
That's an interesting observation.
That could like it's weird. It's counterintuitive to me to think about like fatherless homes producing
good fathers,
males that are confident in their own masculinity. But when you explain it that way, that makes total sense.
Oh yeah, and I do see that, and I've saw that with growing up around a lot of single black families. You know, the guys were all, I'd hear them say, moms would say, "You're my man. You're the man of the house." Like
Right.
they're
That's true.
very,
Yeah,
that's
I've
a
heard that.
very big
And even sex,
anointment.
man, even sex. We have sex young, like
They anoint
11,
young
12,
black
13
men.
years old having sex. So yeah, it's
I think that the black female in the black community tend to anoint their young men with the they charge them with the task of being what they're not ready to be, have no idea how to do. So
exactly,
they
exactly.
have limited resource as to what it should look like, right? Now, this is where I think the black, and I'm going to ask this as a question because Fly, I don't know the answer. I know the black community was really big in church for a long time. It was always like, yeah, you got to go to a black church. You ain't been to a black church, you got to go to a black church. You know, because
Yeah, true.
they real at black
That's like
church.
Pentecostal, right?
Yeah, right. It makes Pentecostal people look like they're practicing.
Right, right.
Okay, I've been to a black church. It ain't the same. Um, but I think that's probably where the Jesus model is probably more predominant in the black community than in the white community.
Oh yeah, the churchgoers, man, they love some Jesus.
Oh yeah,
Man.
you will
I mean,
you
I
went
guess
to
if you have
church, right?
Jesus around, you always have a father figure in
Jesus
a
is the
sense.
father. Jesus is the especially a lot of childless, fatherless households. Jesus become the man of the house as well. Yeah, it's true.
So I think the attack on
That's why media is
religion.
important, right? I mean, it's because I mean, shit. Even with households that had fathers, I mean, anything like my dad, he was just weak, and it was no basis to to form an imago of masculinity on, and so when you don't have that, when you have no father or when you have a weak father, what do? You look to your exemplars. You look to anyone around you. If you're lucky enough to have a good uncle or someone, or a
Grandfather.
masculine, yeah, grandfather, someone like that who can take care of you. Shit, even like just a butch lesbian aunt will do the trick. Just something. Then like then you'll be fine. But if not, you're gonna. I mean, where else do you look? You're going to look to the media. You're going to look to comic books, superheroes, whatever. I mean,
Yeah.
because there's this need to, like, young men know that they have to be more than they are, and they look. I mean, we really like the whole mentor. That's why men mentor so well with other men, but that chain that went back into the dawn
Thousands
of
of
our
years.
prehistory, tens of thousands of years. And that's a chain also with mothers and daughters. I think that chain has been broken on both sides.
Yeah.
Mothers are not giving daughters their dog-eared worn cookbooks anymore. They're not telling their daughters, like, how to talk with
How to be a
men,
good
how to
wife.
treat men, like,
Well,
yeah,
yeah, true.
exactly, like how
Well,
to relate to the
in the black,
neither set neither parent neither gendered parent is doing the job, in my opinion, of teaching their children about how to speak and relate with the opposite sex in these necessary ways that make for social cohesion. And I mean, you look at the dating catastrophe that's happening right now. What's it, over 50% of people aren't getting married. Like, it's all the stats around dating for the last 5 years, and
Crazy.
and marriage. It's just insanity, and it's just like, okay, this is none of the, like, nobody thinks that this is good. I don't think you'd have to be some kind of accelerationist or some kind of hardcore Marxist actually trying to dissolve the nuclear family to think that this is a good thing. And I don't think there's a lot of those people. So I mean, it's everyone seems to agree that, like, yeah, it's gone to shit. Men and women aren't relating to each other anymore the way they used to, and it's like, okay, a lot of the structures and relationships of men and women in the past weren't good and need to be revised and need some progress. That's fine. But it's like we just gave up on the whole flipping thing
I'm
because there was problems with it.
I'm going to jump in on that because you brought something up that sparked a thought in my head. And I've said this to other men because I have a very good relationship with my wife by a lot. I have a fantastic marriage.
Was evidenced by the fact that you're still married, right? I mean,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
these days, if you don't have a good relationship with your partner, people are so eager to divorce. I mean, boom,
But
just
here's
oh
the
yeah,
thing.
well we're done now.
I think that's men's fault because women will behave in the manner in which you treat them. Okay? Women are extraordinarily reactive
I think
to the
human beings are
manner
kind
and
of like that in a sense, though.
right, but
Yeah,
that
she's the intuitive reflection of her man. That's true.
yes. So it's men's place to lead that relationship, and we've advocated it to not our problem because we're called toxic if we want to lead, or it's called toxic masculinity, and I disagree. My wife wants to be taken care of. Seth, does your wife like to be taken care of by you? Huh?
Yes.
Okay, right. And you and I, Fly, you have a significant other. Does she like to be taken care of?
Yeah, indubitably.
Okay.
Well, and here's
and does that create the
here's a little
condition?
clue too. Like I've never one of the number one pet peeves I've heard from women on of every political bent, although mostly leftist women, but it's same with conservative. The one complaint I've heard from all of them about like a male behavior is when it's just such a small thing, but when the man doesn't pick where to go for the first date, when the man throws it back, when the man throws it back to her and says, "Oh, where do you want to go for dinner? Oh, why don't you pick?" Like I've yet to hear a woman who says that's an attractive quality in a man. They all say,
Indecisiveness.
yeah, even if they're like splitting, it's not about who's paying the bill. It's the split the bill. It's fine. It's the indecisiveness at a really core level. Yeah, women do want the man to take the initiative
To be in charge.
and take the lead in some sense, but they want to.
They want
As
input.
far as I can tell, well, they want to. It makes sense for a woman to you find the man whose leadership you actually trust, and then then you secure that guy and then you follow him. But even then you're not following it. Like that's all. I hate all that framing because
I
it's
know.
so it plays into this traditional gender role where women are submissive and subservient, and that's so stupid and ill-formed, and it's not what conservative
Hold on.
relationships actually are about. Even if they think they're about that, like they're not. There's an
You can't
equality
get you
there.
can't
There
get
has to be.
around. You can't. Okay, so I'm gonna really throw a
It's,
wrench in
or
the
it's,
works.
it's like, just to put a point on it. It's like in the kink community where you have like BDSM and you have like the master slave thing, and the optics of it, the intuition is that the master has the control. But if you know anyone in that kink community, it's the exact opposite. The slave has the control, and so again, I don't even like the phrase control, right? But I like that pattern of noticing that it's like a better way to frame it is like women aren't subservient to men by following their lead. I guess is what I'm trying to get at. Like women have power too. The mere act of following or the mere act of being in a quote unquote submissive position doesn't mean that you are subordinate or lesser. And that's why I was bringing up the kink thing, because in BDSM, the person who's in the submissive position actually is the one with the power and the control.
They dictate the terms, the boundaries.
Correct. So
I wanted to add real quick. So I know it's cheesy, but my wife told me this 18 years ago when we got together. She said, and it's probably on a Hallmark card. She said, "I don't want you in front of me or behind me. I want you beside me." And I know that sounds like a cheesy Hallmark card, but I've never forgotten that. And
Yeah.
my wife's a tough chick, and I love her for it. And I play to that I think it's hilarious that she drives a big jacked up, Toyota Tundra, and I have a little RAV4 next to her, and everyone's like, "Oh, nice truck, sir." It's not mine, it's my wife's. And so I think it's fun, but that's our relationship, and I know that's I can't make a sweeping generalization for everybody, but I wanted to add that, my wife makes me a better man. She doesn't make me more masculine because she's subservient or is in some role. She makes me a better man because I want to do the things that, can improve her life and our life.
My
And
wife
don't
made me a
power
better
of
man,
a good
100%.
woman.
Dude,
right.
the power of a good
absolutely.
woman.
My wife has made me the best human I've ever been in all of my life. Without her, like I literally tried to break up with her when I was dating her because I'm like, you're so much better a human than I am. I don't deserve you. You deserve a
did that
better
one.
human than me. Okay, I'm not a good human. I'm terrible. There are so many character flaws that I've got. It's stunning. And she didn't care. She saw my potential, the person I really am underneath the facade that I had put out to the world at that time in my life, right? The version of me that I wanted to present and project.
Well, in Stallings, here's a question for you. So, with everything, your relationship with your wife sounds awesome, by the way, and I totally love the idea of playing into the contrary intuition of like you having a little car and her having a big jacked up car. That's all awesome. So, in the context of that relationship, if you two were walking down the side of a busy street and you purposely Ed, this is what she said about walking alongside you. You're walking alongside her, but you're walking on the side that's closest to the road so that she's farther away from the road so that she's safer. She'd appreciate that, right?
Um, Honestly, probably not. I know that sounds crazy,
Oh.
but there have been
That's a little
situations
disappointing.
my wife's pulled a gun on somebody, and like she she, she doesn't play around, and
Well, that's fine.
the two times I've pissed my wife the most off is when I go to caveman, aggressive, and I tend to escalate, and I tend to confront and conflict, and that's part of my personality. And she has kept me from being the quote caveman in so many scenarios, but twice when it got really violent, she's never looked. I've never felt less like a man in her eyes. Of her, like, what are you doing? You're not a. You can't solve things with violence. Kind of a. I felt like an idiot. So when I say that my wife is beside her, this is just us. You know, I happen to find a really cool, strong person that we are strong, independent, and we are stronger together. And the idea of gender roles, it's weird. We never really had that conversation. Do we play the normal kind of without subconsciously thinking of it? Sure. But she also likes big giant trucks and firearms. So like I play to that like because I'm
But
this.
she likes your long masculine hair, right?
Yeah, it's
She
just
likes
it's
that you're physically larger than her.
right. It's but she's also proven that
Well, and here's a
she
question.
doesn't want a
Those
protector. She wants someone to protect with her, but she doesn't want a protector. She's made that
those two
very
times
clear twice.
those two I want to talk about those two times. Do you feel that you were justified in the level of aggression and or violence that you used? Did you feel that that was an acceptable use of force by you?
50%. One of them, I still like. If I bring it back up, it'll just rehash an old argument. But one, I was 100% justified.
Okay,
Um,
good.
the
I'm just
those
glad to hear that you have like you have. Yeah, okay, no, that's good. I'm glad to hear that.
I think that I've learned a lot because I was more, I was an idiot, but my wife came to me because I thought for years, and I know y'all felt this with the women in our lives, you almost forcing yourself to be a protector when you don't need to be. It doesn't mean that they don't want you to protect them. That's the epiphany that I had. It's not that she knows that I will, and she knows that I will. When I put myself there, without the need, that's when it's a problem. So
She almost saw it like white knighting.
yeah, a little bit, yeah,
Okay.
and she again, I think she was raised by a Marine, and she tried to join the Marine Corps. She'd lost her couple of organs, she couldn't go. She's just a tough chick, and she's just
Right.
never been that person like I need.
She's a
I need
Texas woman,
that.
okay? So let's
Well, but that
hold on,
almost. I
hold
mean,
on,
I don't want to. I
hold
don't
on.
want to talk. I don't want to talk crap about someone's wife. That almost seems like an. Okay, so do you feel that in that moment where you are absolutely right and she's still being intractable on it, do you feel like that's a bit of insecurity? Like
I think
it's all.
it was insecurity on my side because I
No, I
saw
mean on because you were right? So I mean like her not accepting that your use of force in that situation was appropriate seems to be like she's just she doesn't want you displaying like violent masculine tendencies on her behalf, even if it's justified.
Well, the one time, like I said, it was 50-50. The one time where we had to get law enforcement.
Yeah, I'm talking about the time where you said you knew you were right.
Yeah, so that one was, yes. I mean, we were more in shock when that little episode happened in San Antonio. It was a guy on the street.
Sorry, I'm being really pressing here. You don't have to answer
No,
any of this.
no, I appreciate the question. Like, but I use those two scenarios of one. I felt like the right thing, and I put myself in harm's way, not because I thought it was my gender role. It's because I love this person, and it's
you're not thinking in gender roles when you do that. You just do it.
It's just split second.
It's instinct.
The other one that I felt ashamed about was me being insecure that I thought another guy didn't get the hint, and I got very loud and physical about it, and she was my wife, and like anybody would be, like, I'm very protective of my wife. The problem is I didn't really need to be.
Right, so she was embarrassed.
Right, so like the 1% time that it worked in my favor or our favor, I could die on that hill and say, yeah, that this that 1% chance. That's why I did it. But in reality, y'all know, like if you're in a relationship with a woman for that long, I can understand that she, is going to have a different reaction to when she needs to be protected, if she needs to be protected, or what my role is in that.
She was raised by a Marine. I mean, it makes sense. It makes sense that she was taught to be self-reliant. And
so
sure.
I want to jump in for a minute, and I love the analogy with that Stalin. And my wife is oddly enough a feminist, which a lot of people don't know. But
that's a word that has like a zillion different definitions now too. I mean,
well,
it's like liberal.
Okay, understand something. Sandy is in the top of her field. She's always the boss's favorite. Like, she's intentional with all of that shit. She's a single child. She was a daddy's girl. Her dad was a trucker. He didn't swear around her. She was brought up in a very, very conservative home. My wife still doesn't swear. Okay, like
no tattoos.
No tattoos. All
you
like
got a good one,
dude. My wife is like, if you see her, she looks like a librarian. She's this, beautiful.
Actually, she does. Yeah, your wife totally looks like a librarian. That's a good.
She's a scientist, right? But understand something. My wife's got 1,400 hours in a video game online.
Yeah. She's
right?
smarter than you.
She's brilliant. She's sharp. She's very opinionated. Like,
she's crazy because she married you.
Well, here was the thing: is when me and my wife got married, right? I had an interesting conversation.
She clearly, just to interrupt, she clearly knows what she wants.
Oh yeah.
And saw all those things in you. And was just like, and you had no choice. Like,
no,
she bribed the ref. She bribed your corner. Like, the fight was over before you were even in it. And
dude.
That's a classic. Like, that is very traditional. That's like, women have really, like, besides arranged marriages, even in those, like, you can make argument that women have had a lot more subtle influence and choice.
Oh, they do, because of their daddy. Oh, daddy, I need daddy. Yeah, you're done. So me and my wife were talking about, and I was going to ask Seth this question. So when me and my wife got married, we had been married before, both have children, both had careers, both, like, I said to her, I was like, you're 40 years, I'm 40 years old, you're 40 something. I'm not going to start telling you how to act. Like, you're an adult. You've made lots of great decisions. That's how we got to you and I wanting to be together. But I said to her, I'll be quiet about any decision you want to make, but you can't say to me, well, why'd you let me do it? And I'm going to say, because you're a fucking adult and made a stupid decision, right? And if you want to make decisions like that, I'll shut up. But you can't hold me accountable for them. But if I'm going to be held accountable, I get to make the decision. And then I've qualified that by saying, there's only like 5 things I care about. Where I live, what I sleep on, my car, my toys, whatever your toys are as a guy, right? We all have toys. Guns, guitars, computers. Everybody's got a toy. Watches, shoes. Men are inherently giant fucking children. And where I work at, right? Those things are
I
pretty
don't
much
think we're children.
non-negotiable. Oh, we don't grow up.
I think we're simple, and I think there's
So,
I think there's a difference that.
and
Anyway, I'll think more about that later.
and my wife's answer was, "I'm good with that." And because I always, she'll ask me what I think about something. I'll give her, this is my opinion, right? And I want her opinion. So when you got married, Seth, to such a very strong female, and dude, that's a strong female. That is your fucking equal, son. You got some work cut out for you the rest of your life. You get no fucking handle, no breaks. That woman's gonna ride you
She's
to
not
the
gonna
end of the
curtsy
ground,
and
bro.
say,
No,
"Oh, yes, Daddy,"
no,
when she secretly disagrees with you.
no,
You're gonna know.
dude. That chick is throwing the fucking saddle on your ass, putting the spurs on. Ride, motherfucker, let's go. And she's just not going to let up. She'll never let you not be the maximum version of you that you can be, because she won't fucking accept it. I've never met the woman, but just from your description, I know it's probably true. So what did that conversation look like for you guys when you were getting married and you were determining that power dynamic? Because there's always one.
Was
Well,
there an overt conversation, or did you just kind of fall into it?
So I lucked out because we were friends in high school, and the years in my band days and running around playing music. She used to make merchandise for us. She was always untouchable, right? She was part of our girl crowd. Like, she was the matriarch that brought us females. Like, that was her role. Like, she was with us, at a young age, impressionable age in the band days. So we were friends
Was she a
before we were.
tomboy?
I'm sorry?
Was she a tomboy growing up?
Yeah, she was a tomboy.
Called it.
Big trucks, firearms, field dressing deer, and she wanted to
Her
be a
dad
Marine.
wanted a boy.
She's
Yeah.
lucky that she didn't grow up now. They would literally make her a boy. But
Yeah.
anyways,
Right?
No shit.
So I had the advantage of loving her before I loved her. So we knew each other on a different scale than just dating. I think I got to skip a lot of we already knew each other. And so at 20, when we
you were best friends first. That's so
I mean,
Oh,
perfect.
it's an ideal
right,
relationship.
but in an honest, I've had those girls I've kind of kept on a long leash to maybe reel them in and be in the friend zone. She wasn't that. She was a true, like, she's off the table. She's in the friend area. And, I lucked out that I had someone like that. But no, to answer your question, we've had conversations when we spike at like any like natural couple, but we've changed. We've changed together. But I tell my friends that go through divorces and have problems, I'm like, I hate to be, I'm not trying, that's not a humble brag, but I do get a lot of basketball. We are so different people. How the hell do we make it work? And honestly, it's because we are independent people. We have our lives separately and we have our lives together. And I like to hang out with her every single day. And so even though you can be opposites and have very different views on things,
Me and my wife.
when it comes to man-wife relationship, it's there's not a conversation of like, well, this is this. It's like, hey, we're in it together. This is what you got to do. Is she that kind of person? Of course she is. But I'm also confrontational. So every time she tells me to do something, I'm going to fight her tooth and nail to do it. And so it works for us. And I'm trying to make a generalization to our conversation, but I said earlier is that, and I know, Brian, you agree, is that your wife makes you a better man in person, but man, the things that I like about that
She
man
promotes masculinity.
the man she sees is the man I want to be, not society's ideas of what's masculine or not, because I am just the perfect man for her. So that's my goal.
I'm going to bet you're like her dad.
Do I like her dad?
No, you're like him.
He's a Marine conservative.
No. Hold on.
Yeah,
I'm going to qualify that. Her dad is competent. He is driven. He is smart. He is a part of a group that he has pride in. He is attentive. He is skilled. I promise you, all of the traits that you possess, her father does. Now, I'm going to ask Fly the same question I asked you. Fly, I know you're in a relationship, or when you get into a relationship, how do you approach, at least in the black community, men are very dominant group. They all feel masculine. But one thing I know about black women, is they have very strong opinions about everything.
Oh yeah, man, that's true. Well, you met my girl,
Mhm.
and
She's a sweetheart, man. I love your girl.
she is, boy, that girl, that's a soldier, man. She's I hate to use the word feminist, but she's about the woman rights, and we me and her go. You know how I am.
Yeah.
I'm all over the place, and we have our
Who
little.
disagrees with women's
Yeah,
rights? Like we're not
she
Saudi Arabia. We're not trying to stop them from driving. Like who?
exactly.
It's all
But
it's all enshrined in law. Like
she's pro woman to a fault sometimes, but I get her back.
How do you
But
how do you manage that dynamic?
um
Because you're definitely a man's
oh
man,
man,
dude.
oh
I what
I wish we were recording.
when
the
she
thing I wanna
starts
say.
talking like that, what a man should do, I mean, what a woman rights and all, when we get on those subjects, I bring her back and say, "Are you like that?" She said, "Well, in a nutshell, I am." And we go back and forth, and I learned to
Come on, man! I gotta say, she makes her points, and then you lift up your shirt and show her your six pack.
no, what I do, we
What was
agree
I
to
saying again? Oh shit!
we agree to a disagree.
Yeah,
'Cause
all
some
you
of the
gotta do is
shit,
take your shirt off and
some of the
argue.
shit
You
she
have
be
the
saying,
same effect
I'm gonna
as
be a man
You lift
regardless.
your shirt off and you win every argument.
That's like if my wife starts arguing and
I'm
takes
gonna
her
be a
shirt off,
man
I'm not gonna
regardless
win.
in the relationship. So not like she's running and I'm running. We gonna run it, but I'm gonna have I'm gonna have a little. I'm gonna be 51% in this. All right, shit. That's just how it
You're
is.
the 51. No, you're in the 49. I'm pretty sure. I'm gonna go over this. Thanks again for bringing up that pew poll.
So
I mean, it's so broad stroke. I mean, you can't do much with it, but it definitely gives some that racial despair. I'm just looking at that still, and I'm like, yeah,
Well, I
that's
was
gonna be the
going
rest of my day thinking about that.
on that poll too. Like it kind of brought in like maybe it was church related, but look at 34% of Hispanic men. I mean,
Yeah.
they're
Why
highly
aren't the
religiously
yeah,
Hispanics?
blessed.
and that doesn't make
Hispanics are
sense.
closer to white men, than
But
the
yet, like my conception, I'm an ignorant white guy, but my conception of Spanish and Mexican culture is that it's pretty goddamn macho.
Oh yeah,
I mean,
muchísimo.
pretty conservative, I mean, they make some of the best fighters and foot soldiers in the world. Like so,
By a large margin.
yeah.
But they're
Disproportionately.
mostly Latinos. They seem very passionate about their woman.
Oh
And,
yeah.
Well, you can just stop with passionate. Yeah, I mean.
So I'm gonna tidy this conversation up because we're pushing an hour and a half in this topic, and I think we could probably keep going another hour as it's such a long-reaching thing because I don't want to use the term patriarchy.
Next time, we should
right?
talk. Next time, we should talk about the future.
Man, I think that'd be a good conversation.
Because I think we did a good job of sussing out kind of where we
are,
like our descriptive analysis of where we are, and yeah. So it's what's really interesting is like what should
well now we go back to Jesus for a minute,
masculinity look like in the future? Because we know what it looks like now. We've talked about what it looked like in the past.
Right.
So it's like
it's flawed.
The really interesting question, how do we make it?
How do we progress it? Yeah. How do we progress? Maybe next week.
How do we take the best parts of both sides? Like if we just descriptively do it as a binary, as we've done, and we can identify values on the right and left that are good by any definition. Everyone agrees these are good, universally accepted, exactly. And there are some that we can all agree on are not good. So okay, let's start the process of like sorting out the wheat from the chaff and in constructing a better vision. I mean, that's just one of my biggest problems. I've said it before, like with not to deviate, but to talk about like the eco movement, where like I agree with. I'm totally on the side of the Greens. Like I'm totally for progressive, like getting rid of carbon, all that sort of thing. Yeah, no more burning fossil fuels. I'm all for that. The biggest thing that's missing from that is a positive vision of what that future is going to look like, and then a logical sequence of how we're going to get there. It's just all this like doomsaying and yelling And nobody is actually, like, the one thing I've never heard Greta Thunberg say is what a good future where we do all these things would look like. I've never heard that from her or anyone else. And it's kind of the same thing with masculinity, where it's like in the red pill space, and on YouTube, it's people, they're constantly arguing about whose definition of masculinity is correct without giving an inch, without admitting that any part of their definition is wrong. And as long as you're engaged in that adversarial mode, you're not going to get to the part where you get past that, do what we started to do, and just admit that on both sides there's positives and negatives, and that there's clearly a way to
forward.
Make some amalgamation of the two that moves us forward. Yeah.
So I was going to say something that when you were saying that popped into my head that I thought was quite poignant, and that we all want to have a conversation around what we want, and it starts with I, right? Every sentence you see on the social media, on a lot of that type of solution, especially in the context of masculinity, nobody wants to give an inch, right? It's either all bad or all good. There's such a failure of sophistication.
Yeah, it's because it's the difference. Society needs to learn the difference between a debate and a dialectic, and we need to get over. Debates are energetic. They're passionate. They're exciting. Debates have all of the energy and properties of like a sporting event. There's winners and losers. There's nice, clear narrative. A dialectic is a deep dive for truth, where all parties involved put aside any sense of adversarialism and just engage in a logical deep dive with the collective brain power of the group to try and figure out on a subject what is most true and accurate and what is not. It's a completely different enterprise, and it's what needs to happen. Hopefully it's what we're trying and accomplishing on this podcast. I think we are. And but if you like, our videos get 5 views, Fresh and Fit gets 5 million, right? And it's because it's like we're addicted to social media, we're addicted to fast food, we're addicted to instant gratification, we're addicted to cheap thrills and pleasures, and we've grown really unhappy with sophisticated things, and we're not interested in it, and we need to be, because the only way we're going to get forward is using sophisticated tools, having sophisticated conversations, and admitting that neither side, just logically, neither side can be absolutely right or absolutely wrong about everything. So therefore, both sides contain truth. And you have to go into, and that's what these people, if you watch Fresh and Fit or At Everything or any of these freaking debate shows, or even the classic like debates between atheists and Christians, those are all debates, and nobody's giving an inch. Nobody's looking to find out the truth. They're all just looking to lead each other down to a gotcha moment where they can dunk, and and it's all performative. And so hopefully society, by embracing long form content, by embracing conversations like this, is going to be able to get to a point where we get over our addiction to the quick dopamine spike energy of debates, but the debates that don't actually progress or lead us anywhere. They don't do anyone any good. They're not reinforcing tradition. They're not representing tradition well, and they're not being progressive, and they're not getting us into the future. They're a complete waste of time. They're like reality television.
Yeah, something I'm going to quote Peterson for a minute, and he said something about children that I thought was really interesting. He's talking about, don't allow, one of his 12 rules for life, right? Don't allow your children to do something that'll make you dislike them, right?
That's arguably his best rule.
It is, 100%.
Just like, high five.
Right, so...
Man, I wish parents would do that.
The thing that he said after that I thought was really brilliant and poignant to what we're discussing. He goes, if you can't admit that you can dislike your own children, you fail that child so badly, because if you don't like them...
You're just virtue signaling.
Someone else won't like them either. And one of the most greatest gifts you can give a child is likability, because it makes his life fucking better. So
You
that
can't
being
pretend
the
that your
case,
child is a perfect angel
exactly.
that needs no correction or instruction. That's insane.
Right.
And it's harmful to the child.
But I didn't want to
Every
go on the
child
topic of
needs
kids. Hold
guidance,
on.
mentorship, and instruction.
I didn't want to go into kids, but I wanted to relate it to masculinity because no one on either side is willing to admit that there's something flawed with masculinity. And there's a
Well,
great
with their
number of
version,
things.
yeah.
Right. Their
No
version
one
is
has a complete
perfect.
version
Right.
of it.
So whether you're looking at a conservative version of masculinity or a progressive version of masculinity, you have to take into consideration that there's got to be a certain element of it that's wrong and fucked up and needs to change. But it wasn't wrong and fucked up at the time it started. So when we took John Wayne as our initial example of masculinity, and ML pointed out, he was representing men from the 1870s to the 1900s where they were going across the country where savages, or the perception was savages, Indian people who were actually defending their land from fucking foreign invaders, he presented them accurately.
Well, and we don't want to get and what's happened is people have gotten confused because the conservatives, as a general, look at his portrayal of this ancient version of masculinity, this outdated, outmoded, from a different time and context version of masculinity. They look at it and they say that would be good for now.
No.
And
It
it's
won't.
like, no.
And that's
no,
where
it
I'm saying
wasn't-
is, how do
it
we
was perfectly
unpack it?
fine for then, 150 years ago. It's not. It's stupid for us to judge people by our modern morals like we would have done better if we were in the time. But at the same time,
Yeah.
it's also stupid. It's also stupid to look at the behaviors of people 150, 200 years ago and say, well, what we need to do is go back to that. Everything about them was a product of their environment and situation.
They couldn't control their
Well,
environment.
have we really progressed? Have we really progressed?
Yes, we have progressed. We have progressed, like, morally and ethically in ways that are concrete and irrefutable.
Measurable.
Like, if you were to pick, if you were given the choice to exist at any time in human history up till now,
I'm taking
and
out.
you could just choose when to start existing.
I damn sure wanted this 100 years ago, not me.
If you choose any other time, if you choose any other time but now, especially as a black man, I question your sanity. Like, if everything is measurably better and you have more freedom now. Like, do you want to be like people? We have really weird conceptions of freedom. Like, here's a freedom we have now. We have freedom from polio. We have freedom from smallpox. We have freedom from a quarter of our women dying in childbirth. We have the freedom to live on average, 80 years? Our generation, for us, it's going to be closer to 100.
Yeah.
That's a freedom that we don't talk enough about. It's
and they're taking away a lot of freedoms as well. So that's a different subject.
That's a different subject. All right, so I'm going to let it.
And then it comes down to a balance. It's like, do you want the freedom to have a little less Big Brother looking over your shoulder in exchange for no dentistry, no indoor plumbing, no ability to communicate with people outside of your village, et cetera, et cetera?
Pros and cons. Yeah, give and take. I understand.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, it's going to be up to each individual person to make that measure. But I think the vast majority of us will measure it in favor of now. I'm just guessing.
I agree.
Seth?
I agree.
Closing thought.
This was informative. I like the idea of a counterbalance between traditional values of masculinity with the idea and understanding that, we need to keep moving forward and passing the torch for young men. And I think I like the fact that we went down to, instead of generalizations, to our individual experiences, what makes us feel masculine. And most of us said our women in our life is what makes us feel masculine, not just other men, or this idea of the modern masculine man. I like the idea of moving both forward with an actual plan, like ML said, like good actual criteria to come up with, well, what does masculinity look like now, 10 years from now, when we're old men, when we get to 100 with our freedom to do so.
All right.
Yeah, because that's a fair point. Because at 100, having like tons of aggression and some of the other stereotypical masculine qualities that make perfect sense when you're like 20 and 30. I didn't think about that. You're very right. Like when you're 100, all of a sudden it's like, yeah, you don't want to be the most aggressive grandpa in the old folks home. That's not very masculine. That's kind of like
So,
you're just a
what's
crazy
your
guy.
what's your 30 seconds closing? I think that's how we should do it. 30 seconds closing. That way we get out because we can just keep fucking going.
I'm about to say I'll just keep going for everything.
So 30 seconds, you're close.
Oh, who, me?
Yeah.
I guess I should have talked more. I just you guys just got mentioned, and yeah, it's you all. The women in your lives have played. It sounds like a pretty essential role, like an irreducibly complex role in your own formations of your personal self-conceptions of masculinity, which makes total sense to me. So that, of course, just begs the question for me because I don't have a woman in my life and haven't for quite a while. By my own by my own insistence. So it's and yet when I think about myself, do I consider myself masculine? I immediately say yes. So I guess for me, the reasons would be really a mix of the list I made on both the left and the right. Yeah, I guess it's for me. But I guess for me, the question I have to ask myself, the courageous question is, would I be stronger in my self-conception of my masculinity if I had a woman with me? And I can think back to the times when I've only had a few long-term relationships. I've never had a one-night stand. I don't do that. And the women I've been with have all been wonderful. And I can certainly, the best of them, yeah, I definitely felt more masculine when I had a female partner because her being there created just organically situations for me to be naturally masculine that are not extant when I'm alone. So, yeah, I mean, I think I could draw some interesting conclusions from that. But
Fly,
anyways, yeah. Very interesting conversation.
30 seconds.
Well, yeah, 30 seconds. Like I said in the beginning, just be an owner of your truth and have accountability. And yes, the woman does, man. She does make us better men. She does. The right woman, I should say. Yeah, and you know
what women are like.
And you know when she's right.
Be better.
That's true. I mean, everything in life it's a duality. So when you find that one, when you find her, that hey man, hey, what it says in Proverbs, when a man finds a wife, he finds a good thing. He begins to find favor from the Lord. So yeah, man.
Well, and all the men causing trouble in the world today, for the most part,
are single.
On either side of the divide, yeah, are single, young, yeah. So
I'm gonna wrap us up, gentlemen. I can't begin to thank you all for your time, your thought, your consideration. I think next week we're gonna pick up the rest of this discussion and go into what does masculinity need to move forward in a positive manner.
The future of masculinity.
Yeah, that's
what is
call that
question mark.
Future,
the future of masculinity. What is it?
And
what should it look like?
Can we define
we have
it?
The ability. Well, and we should, because someone should.
Yep.
I mean, you set the ideal with the understanding that the only man to ever meet an ideal perfectly was Jesus. So we're not going to do that. So but you set the ideal because you need to have the vision of the perfect
a distance. Yep. All right.
Like every artist.
He's talking.
That.
Stop.
Like, the artist is constantly trying to produce the perfect thing. They have the image in their head, and they can never quite get it. But that's art. And anyways.
Thank you, gentlemen.